Hello, my name's Stefan Senna, and this is my YouTube channel. And thank you for stopping by. I wanted to talk about a few things today. The major or main focus is that life is a mirror, that our consciousness and that how we think and how we feel is reflected in our experiences. And we can look back on situations in life if we're so inclined, and we'll find that, well, the way we were feeling or the thoughts we were thinking contributed in some way to the web of events that turned out to be an experience we had. Now, I'm not saying that this is an easy thing to do. Probably for at least, close to 40 years of my life. Even though I had had near-death experiences, I still really didn't get it. And even up till even a month ago, there were things that I just wasn't seeing clearly, and there will probably be other things that I will have to come into coherence with. But when our thoughts and our feelings are the ones we truly want to have, and that they over time create the experiences that we desire to have, we are in a state of coherence with really ourselves. We're not in a state of coherence with some other being or framework of life. And you could say that there's a God that's perfectly fine, if that's what you want to say. That's perfectly fine, because everything, in my view, is consciousness, and that framework it informs us of how we are thinking and feeling. The reason why it does this is because we are the framework. There actually is no duality. Everything is one. Everything is connected. But from our human perspective, we think that, well, everything's out there. And there's a method to go out and manipulate what's out there to achieve what we want, create what we want, or respond to the things that are out there. And that's all fine. That's what we do. But as we start to change and shift within ourselves, if we choose to, then we start to notice that how we are thinking and how we're feeling does have consequences. There can be small consequences, like perhaps you like a person at a coffee shop that works there, and every time you're there, you just enjoy your conversation in the morning with them. But you wake up late and you just don't get your stuff together, and you end up showing up late, and they're on break, or they've left already for the day. So there's a small consequence. You didn't get to enjoy their company. And then there's big consequences. You could make choices and have feelings that separate you from loved ones or family or friends. Sometimes those actions have or can have lifelong repercussions, and at other times, perhaps it's just a few hours or a few days that you can't see eye to eye, or really authentically show up with each other from a place of acceptance, perhaps forgiveness and love. So the choices we make, our thoughts and our feelings, well, those are how we create our life experience. And that's how the greater consciousness of all that is, which we really are, though we perceive ourselves as separately, that's how that consciousness, which we are, creates everything. So when we look at our lives, if we're interested and we're perceptive, we can see that life is a mirror, that it's not got anything against us, it doesn't have any agenda, it doesn't have any motivation, or it's not trying to place any framework or purpose on you or us. Instead, it's actually responding to how we're thinking and feeling and how we are designing our own mental constructs. Now, as we walk through life, there's something that I've termed mesmeric inertia. And it's perhaps a fancy word for saying that once we start doing things, over and over, it becomes habitual. Now, I don't believe there's a subconscious mind, and I have proved that there isn't one for myself. And when you study the subject, you will find that that's the case. There is no subconscious mind. There is only consciousness. How cruel would it be of the universe and consciousness to create us and only give us access to 5 or 10% of what we think and feel? That doesn't make sense, does it? Well, it's an old idea, and it's been adapted and promoted really to serve to keep people from not taking responsibility for themselves. And that's okay. That's what we do as humans. That's what we do as consciousness. We come up with these ideas, and then we try them out. And then when their time has come, we realize that they're not really working, and we discard them. And now's the time for us to do that with that idea. But anyway, back to the main core focus of this video, and that is that life is reflecting exactly what we're thinking and what we're feeling. The ideas that we, through mesmeric inertia, a constant habit of doing the same thing, creates an energetic framework within we stay. It's like we've decided to only drive a certain path to work or school every day, and we never veer off of it. And, that's fine. That works because you're going to get there at a certain time. You're going to get home at the same time, at a certain time. But that doesn't work with consciousness. Consciousness is evolutionary. If you even study the natural world, you'll see that animals have changed over time, and they're changing even now. There's a scientist who has been studying these very particular lizards on these islands, and as the winds have increased on the islands because of global warming temperatures, the lizards in recent years have evolved to grow longer fingers and claws so that they can hold on to the plants so that the wind doesn't blow them away. I also read a story about a little shark who was stranded. There were several stranded in little tide pools because the ocean, its tide comes up and then it goes out. And this little shark, what they do is if a shark finds themselves in a tide pool, they swim around and they get hungry. They eat everything in the pool. That's all they can do. And so they just sit there and they wait for the tide to come back in, and then they go back out to the ocean. But this one particular shark thought of an idea. because he thought, well, there's probably some food in that other tide pool that I can see if I just stick my head out of the water. So that's what he did. He stuck his head out of the water, and he tilted his little head and saw that there was another tide pool over there. And he thought, well, there's probably some food over there. I've eaten everything here. So what did that little shark do? That little shark decided to wiggle his little body, even though he just had flippers. He decided to wiggle his little body and flop it onto some rocks, and eventually, through spinning and flipping, he got himself out of that little tide pool. He flipped all the way across the sand to the other tide pool, where he then landed in the water and found himself something to eat. So consciousness gets bored rather easily. Consciousness loves to grow. Part of the nature of consciousness is to be inspired by what it is and thinks about what it wants to be. And we're the same way. Unfortunately, however, what happens to us through our human life is we pay attention mostly to what we see with our senses. So we look around and we think, well, I'd like to have a home. And so we think, well, the job I have and the bills I have and, maybe my credit, maybe, that may just not happen for me. I just don't know how that'll happen. And so time goes by and you just keep thinking that, well, it's just not going to happen because based on, I think I need to get some hairspray next time. Used to use that in high school. Funny stuff. But we might get to thinking, well, it's just not going to happen that I buy a house because I've got too many things working against me. I'm inspired, but the inertia, the mesmeric inertia, what's keeping me spellbound is my habit. And so you put that idea aside and you just keep doing what you're doing. And time goes by, years go by, and just it never happens. And so you come round to the point where you just accept, well, I guess it's just not going to happen. So that's one example. There are many, and we each can reflect upon ones that may be things that we're dealing with. But there's something that happens. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but there's something that happens that when we observe the result of our thoughts and feelings and we see that, wow, that's interesting. I just thought that I wanted to see my friend and, I go to this coffee shop all the time that I go to and it's a completely different neighborhood than where they live, and the next day they showed up. And when I walked in, they looked at me and said, hey, we never come here. And it would just happened that the day before you looked at a photograph of them and thought to yourself, maybe I'll stand facing the wind. It may be that you thought of them, maybe saw a picture of them and thought, well, it'd be really nice to see them, and there they are. Well, that stuff happens. It happens all the time. In fact, that happened to me some years ago. And what it does is it allows you to perceive that what you think and what you feel, ideas that come to you, they mysteriously have a way of just showing up. Now, that doesn't mean that we notice them all the time. Sometimes we notice these things, and sometimes we don't. So, but if we decide that it's possible that this can happen, that perhaps this is the way the universe works, then maybe we can just start noticing them more and more. Myself, I started noticing these things, and I decided I would do an experiment. In fact, I've done probably thousands of experiments by now, and I've seen and proved to myself that for next to pretty much anything, I would say, if you think and you feel that it's a good idea, it's something that you'd like to experience, it'll show up. The key, I think, is to not try to figure out how that happens, because that part of our mind, the ego, the one that loves us to believe that we don't have access to consciousness, well, it wants us to believe that we need to figure it out. We need to break it down into steps. We need to organize all the resources needed, and we need to just go to task at creating whatever it is, because that's the only way it's going to happen. So I'll give you an example of this, and maybe you can think of one for yourself. And what I'm describing here is the choice between being coherent with yourself, the universe, or being non-coherent. So, several years ago, I had a nice little Honda car, and I drove it for quite a while, I think perhaps a year. Well, it was a little bit rickety, and it was a great running car. There's nothing wrong with it, but I just wanted something more comfortable. And it was only a few days, maybe a week after I had this thought, I'd like to have a more comfortable car, that something happened with that car, and I took it to the mechanic. Now the mechanic, he fixed it right away. No problem, easy fix. But what else happened when the car was at the mechanic, which I didn't know, is that it was I think it was a water pump. Yeah, he replaced the water pump, or there was some hose needed replaced. I don't remember. Anyway, it has something to do with the coolant, so he fixed it, and this was during the summer. And what he did was instead of putting antifreeze in the car, actually it was towards the end of the summer, yeah, it was in the fall, he put water in the car. He didn't put antifreeze. Now, I didn't know this. I drove the car another month or so, and I kept thinking to myself, it'd be nice to have a more comfortable car. Well, the winter came, and some friends decided to rent a cabin up on Mount Hood, and so I was invited up there, stayed overnight, and the next day when I left, I got in my car. It was kind of hard to start it. And, but it started. It ran rough, though. I drove it off the mountain and drove it home, but it just continued to run very rough. I mean, it just went from bad to worse. And I didn't know what was wrong with the car. I had no idea. So I took it to a mechanic. I said, the same mechanic. I said, the car's not running very smoothly. For some reason, it's gone from being perfectly healthy to running like the engine's going to fall apart. And that's exactly what was happening, because he had only put water in the radiator. When I went up to the mountain in 3 feet of snow, well, that water froze and it cracked the block of the engine. Now, he didn't know what the problem was, and I didn't know what the problem was. So I just drove home and thanked him for his time. And then I decided to just sell the little car. I thought, well, somebody can fix it. I don't know what's wrong with it. And a guy came along and gave me, I think, $600 for it. Then he told me what was wrong with it. Anyway, I was able to have the money to look for another car, so I just rented a car, and at that time it was winter time. They were probably not that busy as far as the rentals go, and they gave me this nice new Toyota car as a rental for only $20 a day. And I thought, this is fine. I'll just drive the rental until I find a nice car. I thought that would only take me a week. So what did I do? I looked at the problem. I assessed what I needed to do. I created the steps by which I would research and make good decisions about a new car, and I went about looking at a lot of different cars. Now, I did this for several weeks. 1 week turned into 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, and at about 6 weeks, I was thinking, well, I'm getting really exhausted looking for a new car. I just can't find one that really fits what I need. I knew I wanted to get a Toyota or a Honda or a Subaru of a certain year with a certain motor that would be good and reliable. But it just wasn't happening. Every time I'd request to see one that somebody might have, and I also wanted to buy one from a person who owned it, not a dealership, because then I could get the history of the vehicle and not jeopardize the possibility of being lied to and getting a lemon from a car dealership. That's a general belief, right? So my general belief and my other ones were coinciding, creating a structural blueprint from which I operated, and that was to go about solving the problem. Now, after about 6 weeks, I was literally exhausted from looking at cars. I'd spent hours and hours looking for cars. Now, about 3 years before this, I started doing experiments with consciousness, and I decided to sit down with a pencil and paper and write a note to the universe. And I wrote the note telling the universe that I really liked the number 67, and that from now on, I accepted with full confidence that 67 would show up for me everywhere. It would just show up like a good friend, and that would remind me that I am in a playground, really, for my own consciousness to view myself. And sure enough, that worked. I saw 67 and license plates. Clients' phone numbers always had 67s, friends' phone numbers. My groceries would ring up to be, end with 67 cents or whatever. It showed up everywhere. And I knew it was the frequency at which it showed up was mathematically, it was improbable. It didn't align with frequency bias as far as, when you see something like you buy a new car, then you see everybody's got one. So it was much more regular than something like that. At any rate, at about 6 weeks, I get tired of looking for a car. I remember closing my laptop. I had been looking on Craigslist and Marketplace, and I was standing in my bedroom, and I just was like, God, I just can't look at another freaking car, And this voice came into my head. Now, I had heard a voice before, and I'll share this on other videos, but at that moment, a voice very clearly spoke to me in my mind. And it said, tonight, you will open up your laptop at midnight and find your car. Now, I will go into this further in other videos, but I had, when I was young, my life saved by hearing a voice such as this. It told me to do certain things that got me out of situations. Anyway, that's just consciousness talking back to you. So it's usually doesn't come, though, when you're trying to find a car, I found. But this time it did. And it may be for the purpose of this story that it did. Well, I sort of brushed that off. I thought, what the hell? Some voice is telling me I'm going to find my car? Oh, whatever, So I went about my day. I got ready for work. I went to work, ran errands, took care of my youngster, and just went about doing what I was doing. And I remember that I did not look for a car that day. I was just done. I was just completely fed up with the whole idea. And I don't remember specifically what I did that night. I might have watched a movie with my youngster, who was about 6 at the time. But anyway, it was late, and then I decided to go to bed. So I put on my pajamas and got ready for bed, and I thought, one more time, I'll just open up my laptop and look for a car. Now, I didn't remember that voice that had gone through my head. I had no, it just was, I never thought about it after it happened. Anyway, so I pulled up the laptop, opened it up, put it on my lap, and I went to Craigslist and opened it up. And this time I thought, well, I'll just look under dealerships. Screw it, I haven't before, I'll just try. So I clicked on, view owners or dealers. And so the first page pulled up a dealership called Silverline Auto. And I thought, Silverline, clouds with a silver line. It sounds good. Maybe I'll just look at their website. They probably don't have anything that I want, but, I'll look. So I looked, and they only had a few cars. And each one of the cars was listed on a different page, so you had to click and go to the next page. And as I clicked through and looked at the different model of cars they had, they all seemed to be very clean and well cared for. And then I clicked on one, and I saw this car that I'd never seen before, and I thought, geez, what kind of car is that? It said Toyota Venza. And I thought, gosh, I've never even heard of that car. Where has this car been? And it just looked cool. It looked like it was the size of car I needed. And so I just got excited. I felt coherence. I felt at peace, at ease. I felt inspired, which I hadn't felt up to that point. So I looked through the car. I was so excited I knew they were closed. And so I emailed them. I wrote and said, hey, I like the Venza. I'd like to come in the morning and take it for a test drive. Then that wasn't enough, so I called them. I knew they wouldn't be open, so I left them a message. Hey, my name's so-and-so. I want to see the Venza. Please don't show it to anybody else. I really want to take it for a test drive, So the next morning, I woke up, and the first thing, of course, on my mind was, geez, I got to call that dealership. So I was pacing around, and I couldn't take it anymore. 10 minutes to when they were supposed to open, which I think was 9, because I think it was a Saturday. I called him anyway. I thought, well, somebody's around, janitor's around, somebody's around. Maybe he can leave a note on the car for them to not let anybody, see it except me. I was very excited and nervous. And I was trying to control the situation. So anyway, I phoned, nobody answered. So I thought, well, I'll just call again. So I just immediately dialed back, and after several rings, finally a guy answered the phone. And I said hello, and I gave him my name, and I said I was interested in the Venza, and I'd love to come in and test drive it as soon as they were open. And he said, sure, yeah, just come on in anytime you want. It's here. It's a good car. It's our mechanic's car, it was the mechanic's wife's car, and they're selling it. And he said, but how did you know about the Venza? We just put it up on the website at midnight. So what did that voice say? Tonight, you'll open your laptop at midnight and find your car. That's exactly what happened. Now, when I went in to test drive the car, it was exactly what I wanted. I was very excited, and I went and told them I'm buying the car. I never once looked at the mileage on the car. So I paid them for the car, and he handed me the title work, the title paperwork and all that stuff and everything. And that's when I looked at the receipts. And that was the first time I looked at the mileage on the car. The mileage on the car was 67. It was a 2010 Toyota Venza, which I still have. So it was a 5-year-old car, and at that time, and it had 67,676 miles on it. So 67676. Those were the numbers. And he had written that number down after I had test drove. So when I got in the car to leave, I turned it on, and those were the numbers on the odometer on the dash. 67676. And what did I tell you about me putting the number 67 as a code into the environment that we call the universe? consciousness. So that was another thing that showed up. It was nice. I don't put any huge importance on the number 67. It doesn't have any magical powers. It's not going to be some spell cast that I do. It's not a totem. It's not an angel number. It's none of that. It's just a number. I could have picked baloney. I could have said, I want baloney to show up at any time I want, it chooses to show up to remind me that I'm in a consciousness that is myself, reflecting myself. It could have been anything. I just chose a number. You can choose something like that if you want. But the lesson within this story is that I was trying to figure out how to make that happen. I was doing what I was told out here in life. Go out, make a list of what you need, get all the materials together, make a plan, and make it happen. I've done that in so many ways I can't even describe in my life since I was a little kid. But the universe is ourselves. And it has a way of just drawing, it doesn't really even draw anything to us. As soon as we realize that we are the universe, we experience ourselves. Now, we're always experiencing ourselves, but we're experiencing mostly mesmeric inertia of incoherence. So we're experiencing the habit of ourselves being out of balance with ourselves. But by becoming coherent and realizing and knowing that we are simply experiencing ourselves, then we come into perfect coherence with ourselves, and we don't have to look and try to figure anything out. We simply just exist in the present moment, being a loving, being a kind, being a good person, being present, and that's really all there is to it. Everything else that arises within us as a interesting idea, like, maybe I'll see so-and-so. It'll just happen. The next day you'll see him in a coffee shop. The next day you'll find the car you want. The next day you'll own a house and move in. Whatever it is, it's our striving to control the experiment, if you will. See if I worded that right. No, it's our incoherence. It's our lack of understanding that we are one with the universe. And because we don't know that this is the case, then we're fearful. We're afraid. We think we have to figure everything out. That the only way is what everybody else is doing. And what everybody else is doing is fine. That's what we do. We're humans. But if we want to grow and know ourselves and how our consciousness actually operates, then we can start to test it. And the only way that we'll know that we are the consciousness that is in all things is by proving it to ourselves. There's not a long enough video for me to make that would convince you that this is the case. You have to prove it to yourself. And the way you can do this is just first by observing how certain things you think about, certain things you feel, certain beliefs that you have tend to fuel how experiences unfold. If you notice this more and more, then there's a couple things that happen. First, you begin to look for it more closely. And secondly, it starts to happen a lot faster. There is a direct link between your coherence and the response of yourself within this field we call the universe. When you're in coherence, there's just an immediate response. So something you say or think, you'll get an immediate response back on. over time. But it starts with little steps, and we'll never get to the place where there's no more steps, because consciousness is always evolving. That little shark, he learned to flip-flop over onto another tide pool, but that's not the end for him. He's probably gonna, or she, probably gonna want to do something else that's more inspiring at another later date. So if you can, just reflect on things in your life, and perhaps you'll see things, how they show up, and just notice them. It's no big deal. You don't have to if you don't want to. But I will share with you that if you do, it'll start to create some peace in your life. You'll begin to feel as if there is order to things, that there is reason and understanding within things. Maybe not all things will be understood. Some things that you just have to let go. But as we become more coherent with ourselves, we no longer feel anxious about having to do or having to be a certain way or certain things. We become more at rest with just who we are, and that is the universe. Thank you.